On the podcast today, we are going to dissect chapter 14 of the Tao Te Ching, which makes up the 14th episode of the 81 meditations of the Tao Te Ching. And this is a wonderful chapter, and as usual, we will use the Jia Fu Feng and Jane English translation as well as the Derek Lin translation. So first we'll mention the Jia Fu Feng and Jane English translation.
Okay. Look, it cannot be seen, it is beyond form. Listen, it cannot be heard, it is beyond sound. Grasp, it cannot be held, it is intangible. These three are indefinable, therefore they are joined in one. From above, it is not bright, from below, it is not dark. An unbroken thread beyond description. It returns to nothingness. The form of the formless, the image of the imageless. It is called indefinable and beyond imagination. Stand before it, and there is no beginning. Follow it, and there is no end. Stay with the ancient Tao, move with the present. Knowing the ancient beginning is the essence of Tao.
And Derek Lin's translation is, look at it, it cannot be seen. It is called colorless. Listen to it, it cannot be heard. It is called noiseless. Reach for it, it cannot be held. It is called formless. These three cannot be completely unraveled, so they are combined into one. Above it, not bright. Below it, not dark. Continuing endlessly, cannot be named. It returns back into nothingness. Thus it is called the form of the formless, the image of the imageless. This is called enigmatic. Confront it, its front cannot be seen. Follow it, its back cannot be seen. Wield the Tao of the ancients to manage the existence of today. One can know the ancient beginning. It is called the Tao axiom. Okay, so this chapter is kind of talking about the nature of the Tao itself and how we ought to think about it. And also, saying to us that the Tao is not some sort of deity like we find in other religions. It's similar or the same in essence with Brahman in Sanatana Dharma. And so it's something that's beyond an object of knowledge.
Yes. Yeah, this chapter seems like explaining deeper what's been said in first two sentences in the first chapter. Like the first chapter, it begins something like this. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. Mm-hmm. So that is trying to deliver the essence of Tao, right? Mm. So this chapter 14, I think it explains more deeply about the nature of Tao.
Nature of Tao, yeah. Mm. That's why there's no sort of image for the Tao. We have the Chinese writing of the Tao, and then some people actually confuse the Tai Chi symbol of the yin yang with the Tao. Now that's a process of the Tao. That's the movement out of Wu Qi, but this is the overarching ultimate reality is the Tao. So the yin and yang represents the movement of energy within the cosmos. And you can say, okay, that's the Tao, but that's not really an image of the Tao.
Yes.
So we don't really find the Tao depicted in paintings and so forth. Yes. Just like Brahman, right? Brahman, yes. We don't see depicted in paintings. We see representations of Brahman, yes, through paintings of Shiva and Vishnu and Brahma, but we don't see an actual depiction of it. Now some people say, what about the Om symbol? Okay, yeah, maybe. But still it's not a complete representation because it's kind of beyond the concept of knowledge.
Yes. The Om symbol cannot be Brahman, that itself. It only can be representation of Brahman.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And
yeah,
that's as far as it can really reach,
yes,
right? So, we shouldn't conceptualize how Tao or Brahman look like.
Exactly.
Right? And again, like even in Sanskrit saying neti neti, right? Mm-hmm. Like not this, not that. We use this term in many different ways, but also it can be explained when we talk about Brahman. It can't be this or it can't be that. It's not about to explain it is that or it is this, right?
No.
It can only be explained what's not when we explain the absolute, the ultimate reality, right?
Yeah.
We cannot say ultimate reality is this or that, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can only say that what's not, right? So not this, or not this form, not this shape or form and whatnot.
Yeah.
So that kind of, again, we can only explain in paradoxical expression.
It's true. It's true. Isn't
Yeah.
it? So we can talk about it like that, but we can't. But it's interesting because in talking about that and like subtracting things from reality, we kind of have a grasp, kind of what it is within our consciousness, because we start to eliminate what it's not,
Yes.
to come more in contact with what it is,
Yes.
so to speak. But even then, it's still not an object of knowledge. It's more so sort of a state of consciousness
Yes.
that we can feel the presence of Dao, Brahman, if you will.
Yes.
And so that's why in this chapter, as you were mentioning, it's kind of mentioning what everything it's not. So it cannot be seen, it cannot be heard, it cannot be held. And these are the sort of the three attributes of the Tao. So the Tao is invisible, the Tao is soundless, and the Tao is formless.
Yes. In original writing in Chinese, this character we say in English and Chinese, bu. Bu means like not, or something like related to more negative meaning. That bu appears like 9 times.
Yep.
Like, and wu, which means nothingness, appears like 3 times. Entire throughout the chapter. So that is to again emphasize what Tao is not, what it's formless. It's not form. It's not the image. This way.
Yeah, that's right. That's interesting, isn't it? It's Derek Lin has an interesting way of talking about this. Like, you know, even in a dark room. So an object in a dark room cannot be seen or heard, but it still can be touched. The Tao is not an object.
Yes.
So it still can't be touched, so to speak. Like, again, this is more to your point, like we're taking more things away to try and understand what it actually is.
When we, let's say, when we define what Tao is, what Brahman is, for example, that can only explained in our intellectual realm, in the logic mind, right? But we know this is not something that we can grasp with the logic or intellectual mind. So it's beyond and it transcends all this state of mind, right? So we can only make connection when we understand what is not there, what is not Brahman, right? Then we again try to kind of embody that that energeticness of energy of that state of consciousness. You can only embrace that state of consciousness.
Yep. And that's why, in some sense, it's as we were saying, it's Daoism is essentially very different to many other religions that have a form of God or a conceptualization or an image of what God is, where the Tao doesn't. Right, the Tao is not a deity, and so the Tao says nothing, and the Tao Te Ching, the Tao loves and nourishes all, but does not lord it over them. That does not favor anyone. When people get into these queries about why do certain bad things happen to good people and so forth and so on, this is just the energy of life. Like the Tao does not favor anyone. It's just all energy, and there's not an overarching lord determining like we are pieces on a chessboard determining our fate. That's not how actuality is.
Yes.
And so when a lot of people think about God, for example, they think that it's a voice in their head talking to them, You know, they think they can have a conversation with God, yeah, and this is just all imagination
Yes.
of the individual. A lot of in some sense, a lot of the voices people hear in their heads, let's be frank, it's their intuition that is kind of triggering them to. That's more part of our intelligence as opposed to being something metaphysical or cosmological. Even though we can say that if we have a very attuned intuition to reality and we can feel and sense things, that is an attunement to the Tao. There is no doubt about that. But it's not like you're in some sort of communion or conversation with the greater totality, because you are only a very small piece of life. You know, I know that a lot of Western religions make us the center of the universe, but in actuality, we are just a small piece of life. You're a piece of life.
Yes.
It's a lot of people talk about like their life, and you should talk about your life, right? But what is the reality here? It's the universe's life.
Yes.
You are just the universe. You have a subjective experience where you feel pain or pleasure, and so then because you have that sense of agency, you make the world about yourself, and then you create this subjective viewpoint within yourself, and then you distance yourself from the actuality that it's the universe's life. It's not your life. You're just a localization of the one consciousness expressing itself.
Yes.
And we forget this. And this is an important part of this chapter. There's a Chinese word called chengwen. And chengwen is to forget that which is real. So a lot of us, especially in the modern day, are living our lives forgetting that which is real.
Yes.
And we are remembering everything that is artificial.
Yeah.
You know, about
And
culture.
keep reminding us too.
Yeah, keep
ourselves.
reminding us. Yeah, jump on the smartphone and just remind yourself daily about what's
just
up.
in case you forget.
That's right.
Yeah. When you said about you having conversation with God as an object, that is to imply we separate ourselves from God. That division, the separation is still there within our mind, more so like unconsciously or subconsciously. And a very strong idea of a hierarchical way of thinking as well, I think. There is that the power that we're not control of, right? Like, power of nature, for instance. But then we conceptualize as God's power, God as in a being or a man or a woman, or so there is the separation that happens there. Then we simultaneously somewhat stop trusting ourselves, our own intuition, and we look to the deity outside. Again, which is based on a duality and the separation. But Daoism and Hinduism essentially is not about the separation. Again, Daoism itself it cannot be divided or categorized. We can only experience through elevating our own consciousness, right? So as you mentioned, we are living the piece of life. So we are one with the universe. We only experiencing our life subjectively. That's all that's happening. And again, that's what we are forgetting. And we've been forgetting for a very long time too.
We are subjectively experiencing the universe's life.
Yes.
Not our life.
Exactly.
And that's what's confusing for people. They go, but what about my life? It's like, well, you essentially don't exist. And the identity will disintegrate upon physical and mental death.
Yeah.
What the Taoist sages do and what the Jivan Muktas do in India is they use that knowledge to disintegrate the identity while living. That's what Jivan Mukta is, right? To be liberated while living. They understand that, well, if this identity is really not, it's a fabrication, and it's actually illusory. When I believe in it, then the work should begin now. I shouldn't have to wait to death and crying on my deathbed like, oh, I'm going to miss you and this and that and this and this. You should have already done the spiritual work that when that time comes, you're ready. You're not holding on and clinging to this life.
Thing is, we shouldn't make this to happen at the deathbed.
No.
It's we want to get to that realization while we are young and energetic.
Yeah, of course.
And alive, of course. And we want to live life and experience life from that place.
Yes, of course, yes.
From not subjective localization. You want to experience life as Dao's way. Dao is the means path, the way.
Yeah, exactly.
In Taoistic perception and Brahman's Brahman world, you want to experience life in that way while you're alive. Why do you postpone? What for?
What for? Yeah. Well, you and I have invested our life into this, and so a lot of people in their 20s and 30s, for example, will invest in business and so forth and so on. And look, horses for courses, right? Everyone has a different aptitude and different life experiences. But if you are listening and watching this and you are interested in the spiritual path, and especially, as you said, if you are in your younger, when you have the energy, you're in your 20s and your 30s, for example, you can really set your life going forward in a positive direction if you start to do the work now. Whereas, and I know this from reading the comments and getting emails and that's all the time, a lot of people will say to me, because a lot of people in their 60s and 70s listen to us and watch the videos on my channel, they will say, oh, I wish I started it when I was your age, because now my energy's a bit more, the prana and chi is a bit more down-regulated, and so the vitality for it is not there, even though the interest is still there.
Yes, the enthusiasm couldn't be as much as you would want it to be.
Right, yeah. When your enthusiasm in your 20s and your 30s.
Yeah, like full power.
Full power, yeah. So like when you and I first started studying and practicing, Eastern spirituality, we were young, so
yes.
The energy is high and your enthusiasm is full power.
Yeah, yearning for knowledge became like a passion.
That's right.
Right. So we were searching for certain physical cities in India, for instance, or Nepal. We actually eager to visit those places to actually see these things and feel the energy of the place and things like that. So it kind of became passion and still is.
Yeah, of course. It doesn't go away.
Yes.
And so, as we were saying with the three attributes, like these three attributes of the Tao, the invisible, the soundless, and the formless, they cannot be separated, as Lao Tzu mentions. Like this is just the nature of the Tao. But it's ironic that, as you were saying, the nature of humanity is the opposite. It's visible.
You gotta be heard.
Yeah.
And you gotta exist.
You gotta have form. Yeah, exactly. It's paradoxical, right? Like, so you are the complete flip side. But the thing is that the invisible, the soundless, and the formless are true all the time.
Yes.
And in this sense, the Tao is something that you don't find in nature because it is that. But everything of nature is of sound, of form, of visibility.
Yes.
But the nature of the form, the sound, and the visibility is the invisible, the soundless, and the formless.
Yes.
That's why when you're in nature and you feel the stillness of nature, a lot of sages will say that's the feeling or somewhat the resonance of the Tao.
Yeah.
That stillness that you feel within nature.
Right.
And how does that represent within us? That represents this. It's represented within us through the stillness of our mind.
Yes.
So the stillness of nature is the stillness of our mind.
Yes.
And so that's how we feel the Tao. And so the Tao is within all of those images. It's the image of the imageless, as Derek translates.
Yes.
But in saying that, it's beyond all things. It's beyond the material world.
Yes.
But the force, the Tao is like a force, or you could somewhat say like a natural law that animates all life. And this is where Li comes in, right, in Chinese. Because every individual has their own Li. Now, Li in Chinese, for those who don't know, means organic pattern. And so in the way in Chinese they translate things in really cool ways, you could say. Like Li, is translated as the markings in jade, the grain in wood, and the fiber and muscle. And so a tree has Li, like when you look into the pattern of a tree, a leaf, and so forth. With a human, our Li comes through we still have Li within our veins and our nervous, through our nervous system and our muscle fiber, but it also comes through our psychological patterns, right? So, like, if you're innately adapted to music, that's kind of your Li, and this and that.
Yes.
For myself, it might be writing, and so forth. So this is what the natural law is. It just sort of is there.
It's almost like I don't know. It's makeup by nature.
Yes.
Like a biological makeup, and also makeup by just nature, your temperament and things like that. Yeah.
It's your blueprint.
Yeah, your blueprint.
It's your blueprint.
Yes.
And so it's somewhat your energetic signature from the Tao. And that's why it's interesting in the modern world, where people are always trying to change themselves and not accept themselves as they are.
Yes.
The Tao, to align with the Tao, you have to accept yourself as you are. As you are. And a lot of people fight that because modern culture tells them to fight that. Their parents may tell them to fight that. Education may tell you to fight that. You're not good enough. Or you should be different. You should look different, right? That's why I always find it curious when I see, especially young people, who will do anything to themselves to look different or look unique, and then there's actually a little weakness in that, because you're not, especially from a Taoist perspective, because you're not accepting just who and what you are.
Yes. And we know this, it starts from parents' generation, right? And that we hardly ever get to see any parents who teach their children to accept for who they are, really, because they themselves can't do it, right? Because they themselves are chasing for a certain image of somebody else, but to imitate that, and and so on. So they do not necessarily they teaching it, but because that's where they are, and that's what the children follow that way, because they don't get to see otherwise, right? Like if adults and parents were to be just accepting as they are, and just being honest to themselves and never exceeding their means, right? And more so like a kind of embracing their blueprint, right? You embrace your own Li and express itself as it would naturally, right? That's truly accepting yourself.
Yes.
Accepting yourself doesn't mean that, I'm like this, what am I going to do? It's not about that. Accepting yourself is to see who you truly are, and take advantage of who you truly are. Like we all have good things to offer, right? Good character we all have, and we have a lot to offer for other people, right? Other people or to society, And accepting that is actually, it doesn't take much. What it takes is to realize what we are not, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what we need to show the younger generation. That's how we can lead and guide them, not necessarily teaching them, like, so to say, that you should do this, you should do that. It's all behavioral, We need to become a good example for younger generation to follow.
The Tao gave you this, right? The Tao gave you this, the physicality, the psychology. And so you don't have to renovate it or upgrade it. You've been given this. And it's a wonderful thing. It's almost blasphemous to try and renovate it and upgrade it, because this is what the Tao has given you. This is what the Tao wants you to be in this current life. And that acceptance comes if you understand that you belong. The Tao gave you this. You belong. You don't need to change it because a culture is telling you to change it, or a society wants you to think a certain way.
Yes.
You just have to radically accept yourself. And in doing so, then you radically become a human for the first time, which a lot of religions and this and that are telling you not to become. But Daoism is about becoming radically human.
I think a human body, human being, human organism itself is an amazing instrument, I think. Because, I don't know, when I was a child, like, you look at the machines, right? For example, like cars, computers, and any kind of machine. You think about how that machine operates. Then, for instance, car, you need to obviously fill the fuel in the tank, and there's engine, and there's all different parts of the machine that all functions together, and that's what makes a car moves, right? So there's all this kind of mechanics that go into machine to work. But there is all this reasoning behind for a machine to work. How do we operate? How we don't, as fuel, we don't need a gasoline. We just need to take the food, organic organic things, natural fuel, and we take food, and then that becomes our strength, and then we gain energy, and that's how we can live. But we don't have engines. We don't have these machines that can actually make us think and walk and do things what we do, right? So I think it's kind of beyond amazing, beyond this greatness. I think that's why I find that this human organic body is this amazing instrument. You know, so when you think like that, you were to kind of appreciate to have a human body somewhat and experiencing this life in this form, you know.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, so that accepting who we are is only what we can do truthfully. So we should make a good use of it, right?
Yeah. It's a good point, because all machines and everything, as you know, and as everyone knows, and computers and whatnot, are built from the outside by human hands. The human body is the perfect technology is human. We come from within the Tao, from out of the Tao. We grow out of the Tao, right? So we are the image or the representation of the Tao. A computer or a car is a representation of the human mind. Though you can say, okay, but the Tao is all that process there too. Yeah, of course it is, but it's still a representation of the human mind. The human being, just like an elephant or a giraffe or a monkey or what have you, are a representation of the Tao. We come from inside out, not outside in. See, where you build a machine, it's from the outside in, right? Yes. And so this organism is an organism of the universe, a natural organism of the universe. Yes. And so there's no need to upgrade it or renovate it. It's perfect as the way it is. And the only problem is that we create all these standards, social standards, where we think we're not good enough or we don't look good enough. Yes. Because we, as Lao Tzu says, in previous chapters, we create standards of ugly, which, or we create standards of beautiful, and which creates the opposite pole. And they're all nonsense in some sense. They're social standards. Now, does that say that some things are not aesthetically beautiful? No, that's not sort of what we're saying. It's the standard itself, right? Like that makes people think that they don't belong. So like, I don't look beautiful enough, so people will do anything to their face or to change themselves to suit a certain culture or social standard. But when you understand that the perfect technology is human, there's no need to do that, because you're a perfect representation of the Tao.
again, we conceptualize what's ugly and what's beautiful, so we spoil the beauty itself,
Yep.
right? So once we set out what's beautiful and what's ugly, then we instantly divide things, what's good looking and what's not, and that's where all disaster really comes, isn't it?
It does, yeah, it does. So, in saying what we're talking, and to follow up on what we're talking about, towards the end of the chapter, Lao Tzu is kind of saying that we ought to, or we need to know in any age, and it doesn't matter if it was the Warring States period of China or 2021, the Tao is always there, never leave it. You know, how could it? The Tao is the origin of life. It's we all spring from the nothingness of the Tao. The Tao in a sense is meontological. Its essence is meontological, which means its essence is nothingness. But it's a nothingness that we can't define. We can't wrap our head around. And within that, so if we look at the whole metaphysical cosmology of the Tao, you have Wu Qi, which is the Tao of stillness. So you could say that that's the void, right? The void of the Tao.
Yes.
And then Tai Chi is the Tao in motion, which is the movement of energy out of Wu Qi, which creates
Boom.
this, you know. But that is the process of Tai Chi creates, you know, the polarities of yin and yang, which then creates, as you said, the world of form, the 10,000 things.
Yes.
So there's this whole process, right? The process of a spiritual practitioner is to try and reverse the Tai Chi movement from going out to going back to Wu Qi, to going back into the stillness. Because, like I said with nature before, with the Tao, we sense the Tao in stillness. Because, why? Because the Tao is soundless, you know, it's invisible and it's formless. So if you go back to those sorts of states of consciousness, especially stillness, which is why stillness is very important within Daoism, Hinduism, and Buddhism, you start to sort of marinate your consciousness in the Tao.
Yes.
You know. So, but you've got to reverse that Tai Chi movement from moving constantly out. And what I mean by moving out here, your awareness moving out.
Yes.
So we've created a world where our awareness is constantly moving out, and then it gets entangled with society, culture, identity, and we think that's who we are. And so there's a lot of work then we have to do to reverse that movement to come back into the original nature of the universe, which is Wu Qi, which is, but again, in a sense, is only an aspect of the Tao, but it's the original sort of where you need to, and this is why in Tai Chi Chuan, for example, a lot of the practices in Tai Chi Chuan language is Wu Qi is like stillness. But in the overarching philosophy, Wu Qi is the void of the universe, the nothingness. And so the stillness. And so that's the closest, well, that's the place where you will marinate your mind in the nothingness of the Tao. And so that's very important for us. You know, that process is any time, any age. But the way that we're gearing our awareness is that, we hear this, and you and I have heard this through emails and comments on YouTube and so forth. People are like, oh no, Daoism is just an old philosophy. It doesn't matter anymore. And it's like, what are you speaking about? Like, because if you understood that this is the nature of the universe, you're speaking complete nonsense.
Yes.
It just because your cool culture doesn't vibe with it no more, it doesn't mean that it's not the origin of all things.
Yeah, no, that's complete misunderstanding. When you mention the Tai Chi, the movement of energy, and from that movement of energy, all the creation comes into place, all this manifested world, the 10,000 things. Again, that transfer over to our mind, for instance. If we were to let our mind keep wander about and keep looking outside, the movement of mind, right? The energy of moving mind, right? And that creates a lot of dramas, delusions, and like what you said, how people undermine this ancient philosophy, and they think, the current culture is the best, and these all very trendy and finite, very timely concepts comes into people's life, and they think that is it, right? And this also can be, I think, a result of the movement of mind. They keep looking outside, right? So again, we need to obviously stop that and step back from it and stop the movement of mind, movement of that kind of energy, right? And then keeps coming back, and then you ultimately want to be in the real still point, that the stillness. And that stillness, and if you can experience that for a longer period of time, then your identity, your gender, where you're from, all this kind of conceptualization of yourself will just naturally, you don't have to even force it, even think about it. It'll just naturally leave you, that kind of idea. It'll just disappear.
Yeah. Well, Egypt had its own culture and this and that. Where is it now? Ancient Egypt, I mean.
Yeah.
You know, so and they probably thought their culture at the time supersedes any sort of naturalistic philosophy. Tao is still here. Doesn't matter what culture it is. Doesn't matter what age of time. I mean, that's kind of a stupid argument, really, but there are many stupid arguments these days when people, as we see in the world, right? Like a lot of people, natural things that are natural, people are confused about, especially in America, which is really weird.
Just the really sad thing about the current world this time, this moment, is because it's like all around the world we know this, that the traditional culture is slowly disappearing. If not already, it disappeared in certain countries, right? And what they've turned into is the economy and finances. And the reason why is because finance and economy, how much money we have, it transfer into our survival mindset. Money equals survival now. But I think materialistically, we are living in most prosperous time ever in history, I think.
For sure.
Of course, there are the people who are dying of starvation right now, right?
For sure.
But we have other resources to even help those people to get out of that situation as well.
That didn't exist before.
Yes, exactly. If you were to direct the finance in the right way, it would happen. But like you said, in the natural world, the starvation would never happen. It cannot happen,
no.
Right?
No.
So now I think the people more turning into this religion of economy, people would defend it. Why? Because that's where their survival depend on. But the real crisis that we're in at the moment is the crisis of dying the traditional culture, the crisis of dying sanity. It comes from the psychological health. It's not really about economy. Like I said, we are living in most prosperous age ever, I think. We have too much food available out there. People have to throw them away. All these things happen. So it's not about economy, I don't think. It's a crisis come from the death of traditional culture, which again prevents to see who we truly are, right? It prevents to have a real sense of community. That's where real crisis is.
As Judy Krishnamurti said, crisis of consciousness.
Exactly.
Right, and he was talking about this back in the 30s and the 40s. And to your point, which actually is what is being spoken about at the end of the chapter, is that if we look at tradition, tradition itself is the evolution of culture.
Yes.
And so traditional knowledge works and has worked, and that's why we continue to build upon it to advance. And Derek Lin actually has a good way of explaining this, because he says the Tao works better for us ever than it has ever before, because we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We have all of this traditional knowledge behind us, all of this cultural evolution. And so, we are in a really great position to understand the Tao, to dive deep, because the sages have done all the work before us.
It's almost like tools are already made.
Yeah.
It's already given to our hands.
Yeah.
We've got to make something.
Got to make something out of it, yeah.
Yeah.
So we stand on the shoulders of giants, and we are taking a turd on the shoulder instead of standing up and really, living the Tao.
Yes.
And that comes to a little bit with the confusion in the world and the cultures, especially in the modern day, but even before that, right? As Jiddu said, crisis of consciousness goes back to 30s and 40s and earlier,
Yes.
And so we're kind of living. We don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Yes.
We are standing on the shoulders of giants, and we should use it wisely.
Yes.
We should be advancing the traditional cultures. We shouldn't be getting rid of them just because of a certain mindset in the modern world that is confused, that wants to get rid of this certain, the ancient way.
Yes.
So what worked for the ancients works for us.
Yes.
As we were talking about, as I mentioned before, with Egypt, right? There was an Egyptian culture and ancient Egypt and this and that. All of these cultures and this and that have come and gone. This culture that we live in will come and gone. I know a lot of people get angry about that,
Exactly.
but it will come and go.
Exactly.
And it will look like a dinosaur in the future. But the sun still rises every morning. That's the Tao. And so that's what we're not realizing. We're not realizing the Tao, and as I mentioned before, Cheng Wang. We're forgetting what is real.
Yes.
And we're investing in what is not real.
Yeah.
So this culture that we create, these mind pathogens that we consume our life with, especially in the modern day, all of this is not real. They originate from confused minds that suffer from Cheng Wang. They suffer from forgetting the Tao.
Yes.
And that's what we need to realize. To actually stand on the shoulders of giants and advance what the sages have left before us.
Yes. People often like to think very highly of themselves, right? And especially we see that a lot. I mean, it's been happening for a long time. So that we like to undermine this ancient knowledge because it's more than 2,000 years old, and time had moved on from that time, right?
Yeah.
So that we think we are much more advanced and we are much more capable and we are intellectually smarter and this and that. But are we really? The thing is, when you look at the whole history of evolution of human beings, it's 2,000 or even more is like not even a speck of a dust.
Yeah, nothing, yeah.
Biologically, we're not even not 0.1% different.
Yeah,
exactly the same.
Yeah.
So what ancient times worked back in the day, it still works for us as well.
Yep.
Biologically, genetically,
Yep.
not that far off.
No.
Yeah.
So like we mentioned with survival psychology before, right? So how insane we are in the modern day is, as you mentioned before, we have a lot of things taken care of.
Yes.
But we still find a way for our survival psychology to slip under the door. Oh, my life is like this and that. So we build these artificial anxieties because we can't get out of that survival psychology. We're not, it's not 60,000 years ago on the savannah. It's, it's nothing like that. And so we find a way to do that. And then we overlay that survival psychology into, certain philosophies and ideologies in the modern day, which are tribal in nature and not human in nature.
Right.
Yeah. See?
More animalistic.
Animalistic.
Primitive.
That's why you see a lot of aggressive people online, a lot of aggressive people in these ideologies. It's because they have this primitive mindset. They are slipping into it. They don't even know it. They will use things like social justice, for example, to justify their aggressiveness and their survival psychology. Whereas Daoism is calling on us to be human.
Yes.
And to become human for the first time.
Yeah.
And if we all did that, there would be no reason to, there is no reason to fight injustice and that, because everyone will be at peace and harmony with each other.
Exactly.
But we have to shed the survival psychology to understand that. And the sages did that 2,500 years ago, even earlier. Why can't we do it in the modern day?
Exactly. Again, sages given us all this knowledge. We have all the tools already made, and it's been given us. So, make a good use of it.
Make use of it while you're living, right?
Yeah, exactly. We no longer have to be in this desperate survival mindset anymore. We just allow ourselves to be primitive in that sense, right? Yeah, so the very last sentence here is saying, knowing the ancient beginning is the essence of Tao.
And that's what Daoism is really calling on us to do, to always remember the ancient
way.
The ancient way.
Yeah.
To remember the Tao.
Yes.
And how do you remember the Tao, as you were mentioning? Through what it's not.
Exactly.
So when you neti, when not this, not that, then when you're subtracting it all, your heart and your mind, your shin, heart and mind, come to stillness. And then you are in the womb of the Tao, so to speak.
Yes.
And so then you experience peace and tranquility, and you are free from the artificial boundaries and borders that society and culture and religion create.
Yeah.
And so that's the essence of this chapter, isn't it?
You will purely follow the law of nature, right? And because we are part of it, and that's where we come from, right? And that's where we go back to. We just purely follow the nature's way, which is Tao.
Beautifully said. So it's not your life.
No.
It's the Tao's life.
Yes.
And that's what we actually need to remember.
Yeah.
So guys, we hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time.